I loved her dearly. Why do we love? It's really strange to focus on just one being in the world, to have a single thought in your mind, a single desire in your heart and a single name on your lips, a name that rises incessantly, that flows from the depths of your soul like water from a fountain, that rises to your lips, and that you say, repeat, mutter constantly, everywhere, like a prayer. I'm not going to tell you our story. Love has only one story, always the same. I found her and I loved her. That's all. And I lived for a year in her affection, in her arms, in her caresses, in her gaze, in her clothes, in her voice, enveloped, trapped, chained to everything that came from her, in such a way that I no longer knew whether it was day or night, whether I was dead or alive, on the old earth or somewhere else. And then she died. How did she die? I don't know, I've forgotten. She came back all wet one rainy night, and the next day she was coughing. A cough that lasted about a week and then she was in bed. What happened? I've forgotten. Doctors came, prescribed medication and left. They brought medicine, a nurse made her take it. Her hands were hot, her forehead burning and damp, her eyes bright and sad. I spoke to her, she answered me. What did we say to each other? I've forgotten everything, everything. She died, I remember well her faint breath, so weak, her last. The nurse exclaimed, "Oh, I get it, I get it." I knew nothing more. Absolutely nothing. I saw a priest who said, "Your mistress." It seemed to me that he was insulting her. Since she was dead, no one else had the right to know that she had been my mistress. I threw him out. Another came and was very kind, very affectionate. I cried when he talked about her. They consulted me about various things to do with the funeral. I don't remember. But I do remember the coffin and the sound of the hammers when they closed it. Oh my God! She was buried. Buried. In that hole. Some people came, friends. I walked the streets for a long time. Then I went home. The next day, I traveled. Yesterday, I went back to Paris. When I saw my room, our bed, our furniture, the whole house where everything that remains of someone's life after death has been left, the sadness overwhelmed me again, so intensely that I almost opened the window to throw myself into the street. No longer able to stand between those objects, those walls that had sheltered her, and which must have contained in their imperceptible gaps thousands of particles of her skin and her breath, I grabbed my hat to leave. Suddenly, as I reached the door, I passed the large mirror that she had placed in the hall to look at herself, from head to toe, every day before going out, to check that everything was right and elegant, from her boots to her hat. And I stopped, abruptly, in front of that mirror that had reflected her so many times. So many times that I should have kept her image too. I stood there, trembling, staring at the smooth, deep, empty glass, but which contained all of her, which possessed her as much as I did, as much as my passionate gaze. I felt I loved that mirror, I touched it, it was cold. Ah! Memory! Memory! Painful mirror, burning mirror, living mirror, horrible mirror that brings all the tortures. Happy are the men whose hearts, like a mirror where the reflections slide and disappear, forget everything it contained, everything that passed in front of it, everything that was reflected on its surface, in its love. How I suffer. I left and, involuntarily, without knowing it, without wanting to, I went to the cemetery. I found her grave, a simple grave, a marble cross with a few words, "She loved, was loved, and died." There she was, underneath, decomposing. What a horror! I was sobbing, my head on the floor. I stayed there for a long, long time. Then I realized that night was approaching. Then a strange, crazy desire, a desperate lover's desire, came over me. I decided to spend the night with her, the last night, crying at her grave. But they would see me, they would throw me out. What could I do? I was clever. I got up and started walking around the city of the dead. I walked. How small this city is compared to the other one we live in. We need tall buildings, streets, so much space, for the 4 generations who see the light at the same time, who drink the water from the fountains, the wine from the vineyards, and eat the bread from the plains. And for all the generations of the dead, for all the people who have come down to us, almost nothing, just a plot of land, almost nothing. The earth absorbs them, oblivion erases them. Farewell. At the far end of the inhabited cemetery, I suddenly spotted the abandoned cemetery, where the old dead have just mixed with the earth, where the crosses themselves are rotting, and where the last ones to arrive will be placed tomorrow. It's full of wild roses, sturdy black cypress trees, a sad and magnificent garden fed with human flesh. I was alone, completely alone. I crouched down near a green tree. I hid myself completely between the thick, dark branches. And I waited, clinging to the trunk like a castaway to a wreck. When the night became dark, very dark, I left my shelter and began to walk slowly, with slow, silent steps, through this land full of the dead. I walked for a long, long time. I couldn't find her. Arms outstretched, eyes open, bumping into the graves with my hands, my feet, my knees, my chest, and even my head, I walked without finding her. I touched, groped like a blind man looking for the way, feeling for stones, crosses, iron railings, glass wreaths, wreaths of dried flowers. I read names with my fingers, running them over the letters. What a night! What a night! I couldn't find it. There was no moon. What a night! I felt afraid, terribly afraid, on those narrow paths between 2 rows of tombs. 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 Always tombs. To the right, to the left, in front, around me, everywhere, tombs. I sat down on one of them because I could no longer walk, my knees were so weak. I could hear my heart beating. And I also heard something else. What was that? A confused, indefinable sound. Was that sound coming from my exhausted mind, from the impenetrable night, or from the mysterious land, the land strewn with human bodies? I looked around. How long had I been there? I don't know. I was paralyzed with terror, hallucinating with fear, about to scream, about to die. And suddenly I had the impression that the marble slab I was sitting on was moving. Indeed, it was moving, as if it were being lifted. With a leap, I threw myself onto the tomb next to it and saw the slab rise vertically, and the dead man appeared, a naked skeleton pushing the tombstone with his back bent. I could see clearly, even though the darkness was deep. I could read on the cross, "Here lies Jacques Ollivant, dead at the age of 51. He loved his people, was honest and good, and died in peace." The dead man also read what was written on his grave. Then he picked up a stone from the ground, a small pointed stone, and began to carefully scrape away the writing. He slowly erased everything, staring at the place where the letters had once been engraved, and, with the tip of the bone that was his index finger, he wrote in bright letters, like those lines we make with the tip of a match. "Here lies Jacques Ollivant, dead at the age of 51. He hastened the death of his father, from whom he wished to inherit, mistreated his wife, tormented his children, cheated his neighbors, stole whenever he could and died miserably." When he had finished writing, the dead man contemplated his work, motionless. Turning around, I noticed that all the graves were open, that all the bodies had left them, that everyone had erased the lies inscribed on the headstones by their relatives in order to restore the truth. And I saw that they had all been executioners of their relatives, vengeful, dishonest, hypocritical, lying, treacherous, slanderous, envious, who had stolen, cheated, committed every shameful, disgusting act. These good parents, these faithful wives, these devoted children, these chaste young women, these upstanding businessmen, these men and women considered beyond reproach. They were all writing at the same time, on the threshold of their eternal abode, the cruel, terrible and holy truth that everyone ignores or pretends to ignore on this earth. I imagined that she too must have written the truth on her grave. And now, without fear, running between the half-open coffins, between the bodies, between the skeletons, I went towards her, certain that I would find her soon. I recognized her from afar, without seeing her face covered by the shroud. And on the marble cross where I had read before, "She loved, was loved, and died," I now saw. Going out one day to deceive her lover, she caught a cold in the rain and died. They seem to have found me unconscious at dawn by a grave. May 31st, 1887. See you in the next video.